Talking today about The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, aka The Hobbit Part 1. This is the first of three movies that make up the Peter Jackson Hobbit trilogy. It originally came out in theaters in 2012. I saw it on DVD in Cambodia in 2013. Now, you may remember that this movie opens to pretty bad reviews even at the time. And then in the subsequent years, time has not been kind to this movie. I think the longer it's been out, the more critical people are of it and of the whole trilogy. There are any number of video essays on YouTube talking about what a disaster the Hobbit trilogy of movies is. Uh, there are a number of them, but my personal favorite is the one by Lindsay Ellis, who has a trilogy of videos deconstructing the Hobbit trilogy and going into all its faults. So I've watched her video. I find them very entertaining, very insightful. I understand completely where she's coming from. And I would recommend it as very interesting viewing to anyone out there who hasn't seen it. I'll try and remember to link to it in the description down below, or at least link to the first video. But I've got to say, I actually did not mind these movies. And I know that's an unpopular opinion to have nowadays when the general consensus is that these movies were the worst thing ever. But I found them entertaining. All three of them, even the hated third one in the trilogy. And some other day I'll get to talking about maybe the second and the third movie. But today I'm just going to talk about the first movie, An Unexpected Journey. Maybe some of my own background with The Hobbit. And I've talked about my background with this before on this channel when I was reviewing the books. But to my mind, The Hobbit is forever associated with the 1977 animated Rankin Bass movie, which I saw on TV as a kid. I taped it on VHS and watched it over and over again. Once I had already absorbed the movie, actually reading the book felt like a little bit of a chore. Why bother reading the book when you already know the story from the movie? Although I did eventually read the book when I was in college. And then I saw the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies when they came out. I liked them well enough. I was never huge into them like everybody else seemed to be. I thought they had some interesting parts, but some boring parts as well. So all that maybe is a long way of saying maybe I don't have the same emotional attachment to this that a lot of other people do. And I also kind of feel like The Hobbit already had a definitive movie treatment. That was the 1977 animated Rankin Bass movie. That, I mean, okay, I know it has its flaws and it's not great animation, but that just made a big impression on me as a kid, and I didn't really need to see another movie version of The Hobbit. I feel like that was already the movie version of The Hobbit for me. So when the criticisms of this movie came out, and I read all the criticisms before I got around to seeing the movie, that they added a bunch of scenes that weren't even in the book, and they kind of were adding stuff to the story, I guess, was a thing that appalled a lot of fans. I thought, well, why not? Go ahead and add a few extra scenes. Maybe it'll make it more interesting. We've already read the book. We already have the Rankin Bass animated movie, which is very faithful to the book. I didn't view it as a huge heresy to add in extra scenes, and I thought maybe it would even be an interesting thing to do. Now, the fact that this movie is way too long is another common criticism that a lot of people have of it, and it is pretty long. I think maybe if I would have watched it in theaters, it would have bored me a lot more. I watched it on DVD, and it's close to 3 hours long. It's like 2 hours and 40 minutes long or something like that. I watched about 1 hour a night, so I broke it up into 3 nights, and that suited me fine. I mean, I if you watch it in the theaters and you have to watch all 3 hours all at once, but if you're watching it on DVD, just don't watch it all at once. Problem solved, as far as I'm concerned. Um, I thought, and granted, I broke this movie into three different parts, but I thought it was entertaining enough. I thought, and actually, in terms of maybe like the pacing, meaning like the action being quick, in some ways, I know this is heresy to say. In some ways, I thought it was an improvement on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I liked it, but I thought there were some scenes in there that just dragged on too long, and Peter Jackson was overly in love with slowing things down and having like slow motion type scenes. Whereas The Hobbit seemed like it was moving at a faster pace, and that suited me just fine. The only thing was, and some of those CGI action sequences, like when they're fighting the trolls or when there's that battle in the Goblin Cave, the screen seemed very busy. And I suspect that this would have worked a lot better seeing it on the big screen in the theater. I was watching it on my small television screen, and it was just like sometimes I wasn't even quite sure where to direct my eye with all these things leaping around and fighting. At other times, I just felt it was a little bit hard to take in all the action that was happening. I mean, I think obviously this movie was made to be seen on the big screen. So seeing it on a television screen maybe is problem number one. But I think, because of CGI and all this stuff, I think action sequences just have become a lot busier than since I was a kid, right? When I was a kid and you were watching an Indiana Jones movie or whatever, there was Indiana Jones fighting the Nazi, and there were just like the two guys in the screen. Now you watch some of these CGI scenes in The Hobbit, and there's a whole bunch of characters just leaping all over the screen, and it does have a lot of energy to it, makes it feel somewhat exciting, but it also makes me feel a little bit confused and sometimes, and I don't know, it makes me feel a little exhausted watching these scenes as if like I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to focus on. But minor complaint. Overall, I thought the pacing of these movies was very good. I thought that the Gollum scene when Bilbo was facing off against Gollum for the game of riddles was very good. There was some tight directing on that scene. It has the potential to be a very boring scene with Bilbo and Gollum just sitting there talking to each other, like no action or fighting going on. But I thought there was a good deal of suspense in it. I thought the additional material was interesting enough, and it was interesting to see how the filmmakers were trying to connect this more to the Lord of the Rings than was originally in the book. There is, as has been pointed out by almost every other reviewer, a tonal problem. And this dates from the original source material. So I think everybody knows this history well enough. But the Hobbit, the book, was originally published in the 1930s and was more of like a whimsical story for kids. The Lord of the Rings didn't come out till 20 years later in the 1950s, and by that point, Tolkien was shifting the style of the story to be more epic for adults. So the idea is, well, there's always been a little bit of awkwardness having the two sit side by side together and be in the same universe. I guess when you're reading these, you don't mind it as much because you understand that the audience is supposed to grow up with the story. Watching them as a movie, it's a little hard to smooth over that disconnect, and especially because The Lord of the Rings got filmed first. And The Lord of the Rings, my understanding is it got filmed first because they couldn't get the rights to The Hobbit initially because of all these insane legal copyright things. So because the audience for this movie was expecting it to be more epic, like Lord of the Rings, they had the filmmakers felt like they had to make the battle scenes a lot more intense and bring in all sorts of things that weren't from the book, and just make it a lot more busy, and the fight scenes more epic. And I understood that they needed to do that, and I didn't mind it so much. Again, I know it's not in the book, and I know that they're changing the tone of the book, but I understood why they had to do that. And the book is still there if you want the original story. It's just that the movie has become something different. So I thought this movie was fine. I thought it was fine. I don't have the hate for it that other people do. I mean, I think there were a lot of people expecting the perfect Hobbit movie, and then were dismayed when this came out. But I think even those people must have been disillusioned even before this movie hit theaters, right? From the moment we knew that they were splitting The Hobbit up into three separate movies just to milk it for as much money as possible, then was certainly the cue right there to go ahead and lower your expectations and expect something that was going to be a little bit, expect something that would not be the perfect movie, right? And hopefully in another 20 or 30 years, or however long it takes them to sort out the copyrights, somebody will take another crack at this, at filming The Hobbit, and maybe they will film it all in one movie, and make it just the perfect movie. But until that day, I don't mind the Peter Jackson movies. And I'll come back someday in separate videos to talk about movies number 2 and 3 in this trilogy, which, yeah, I didn't mind those either. But I'll talk about those on another day.